We're going to be talking about memory in this episode of How to Write Good, but we're going to be talking about it in a different way. A writer named Lynda Barry said that we should start with memory because once you know what real images feel like, it's easier to recognize that sensation when writing fiction. So we are going to be talking about that. We are going to be talking about looking at the ordinary things to help us see or help us experience a certain thing when we are writing, help our readers to experience a certain thing when we're writing. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. So Lynda Barry says that it's a good place to start is memory when you're writing because once you know what real images feel like, it's easier to recognize that sensation when writing fiction. It will work for anyone who has any kind of curiosity about writing or remembering, especially people who always wanted to write but were confused on how to start. And I think I've talked about this in the past if I'm understanding her correctly. There was another writer who said that he has this build-up process to his writing itself. And what he said is he sits down and he messes with certain things with writing. And what I think she is saying is that she is remembering things from her past and she's trying to recreate those things in her mind from her past. She's trying to remember these different things. And that's kind of what I do, but I do it in a different way. I talk about it as daydreaming. I talk about this idea that you have a specific idea for what you want to happen in your book. So what you do with that specific idea is you imagine how it's going to play out in as full of detail as you can before you actually start writing. And once you have a clearer picture of how that's supposed to play out, it's going to be much easier to actually write that specific thing. Just to go along with that, one other thing I do that I found very useful as of late is I try to get a specific image in my mind of the initial part of the scene. And I found that if I can have the initial part of the scene play out in my mind, whether that's 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 2 minutes, or it's probably not 2 minutes, it's probably more around 10 seconds or less. Once I have that initial impression playing out in my mind of the scene, I can use that impression, I can create the beginning of the scene, and I can give myself momentum to write the rest of the scene. And I think this is what she is getting at to a certain degree. She is going back, she is trying to remember real things that happened. She is trying to recreate them in her mind, and then when you recreate a specific memory in your mind, you actually have a specific feeling that goes along with your memory. And if you have any curiosity, like she says, about remembering, then you can get into this habit of forming images and pictures in your mind. And then when you sit down to write, it's going to be much easier to start writing because you already have something to work with. And this is my big thing. Have something to work with before you write, and you'll have a much easier time of doing it. Another thing I think that is very interesting that she talks about is taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary, right? Taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary. So there are many things. I think that you could probably, if you just focused on this, there are a few things that you should focus on. I think this is very good advice. But if there are a few things you could focus on when you're writing or trying to come up with things to write about, instead of, you could have a big, huge story, right? And I actually just saw a video on the movie Logan about Wolverine about this, and I thought it was very good. You could have a very, very vast story. It shows a huge event within history, or it shows a huge event within a fictional world. And you could talk about that event in a way that is 1,000 feet up, or you could talk about that event in a way that is grand on an epic scale, right? You could show all these different peoples clashing, and you could show the effects on the countryside and what happens to people. And this is similar to what happens in superhero movies in most cases. So superhero movies, what happens is they show these big battles, right? And I always have found superhero movies to fall flat in a lot of different ways. And this video was talking about this idea that instead of taking this big perspective, it was a good analysis of it. The movie of Logan, the movie about Wolverine and his last days, show a very intimate portrayal of the character. And what it does is it narrows the focus from this huge bird's eye perspective to something very small. I've talked about this in the past as well, to focus on the little details, because the little details can have a huge punch. So maybe narrowing your scope, as Lynda Barry says, is a good thing to do. I think this is a good thing to do within your writing because it's more manageable in general, but it actually connects to people better, right? She talks about this idea that what does it feel like? You know, it's normal that people die, but how does it feel when someone dies? It's normal that people die. And then you express how it feels. You express the experience of someone dying, and you're able to connect to this phenomenon that tons of different people experience in their lives. Everybody experiences someone dying in their lives. It's just a part of being a human. Everybody has bad days. Everybody has days where they don't want to get up. You can use these normal things and make them bigger. You can pull the veil back on them, right? One thing that I've talked about in the past is that art is not trying to do something crazy. It's not trying to show or do something that is beyond the ability of someone to understand. It is trying to pull back a veil on reality and put something into, show something clearly in reality. And I think that's what this advice is getting at as well. We're not just trying to express something inexpressible. We're trying to express something that is so intimate to who we are. And when someone who reads it or sees it, if it's in an art piece or hears it, when somebody comes in contact with what we've created, they understand it to a greater level. So in some ways, it's transcendent. And that's what I think she's trying to express here. I'm just going to read some of what she says. When someone dies or leaves or falls out of love with us, we call it little things. We say it's little things I miss most. The ordinary things. It's the little thing that brings them back to us unexpectedly. We say reminds us, but it is more than reminding. It's a fire. It's an inundation. Both fire and flood is memory. It's a spark and breach so ordinary we do not question it. The atom is split, the little thing. So she is talking about this idea of when someone dies or when somebody's gone or when we're feeling hurt because of an absence of someone. There's the little pieces that we see in life that bring their memories back to us. And we can do that same thing with a lot of different things within our writing. We focus on a small thing. I've talked about this before. You focus on the small thing, and the person who is reading can fill in the gap, right? They can fill in the rest. If you explain the tire on a car, the person is going to picture the entire car, but they're going to get that image of that spinning tire much more clearly. Some people who are filmmakers do this wonderfully. They focus on one little piece, and we do not need to see all the pieces. We know enough to get the rest of the picture just from that small little piece. Or maybe we don't even know yet, but slowly we see more and more, and then it is revealed that that piece is part of the whole. And it gives us a different perspective on things. And she is talking about memory. She's talking about this thing where you're trying to remember certain things about a certain person, right? Bringing this back to the beginning. She's saying that you remember the little details, or you see something that reminds you of that person. And it's not something big, and that's still what we're trying to do. We're trying to form a memory of the things we want to write. You know, it isn't a true memory, but we're trying to form something of a memory of the things we want to write. And we are using the little details to bring those, we're bringing those little details into our writing to show the reader. And by using these little details and expanding on these little details, it is more real. The reader, the experience we're trying to convey is more real to the reader than what we would have been able to do otherwise. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support me, there's really one simple thing you can do. You can go to danielpoppie.com/newsletter and sign up for my newsletter. And when you sign up, you'll actually be able to get access to my publication roadmap. So that's everything I have planned for pretty much every project I have into the next decade. Again, that is danielpoppie.com/newsletter. You can also find the link below.